There are a wide range of flowers, vegetables and herbs that we can grow at home every year, and many of them can be grown from seed. Now when you're growing from seed, you can sow in a number of ways. You can use a windowsill, you can use a greenhouse like I've got here, maybe with a heated propagator if you're sowing very early in the year. And you can sow seeds into either pots. Small pots are great. You can sow seeds individually, or you might sow a number of seeds together in a larger pot. Or you can use what are called modular seed trays, which is a seed tray just got lots of individual modules in, fill it with compost and sow seeds in those. But today I'm going to use a slightly different technique. I'm going to sow my seeds into little coir pots. Now these fibre pots come as compressed pellets like this, and all you have to do is soak them in water to make them increase in size. You just get the pellets themselves, put them in a tray, add some water in the bottom of it, and within 30 minutes or an hour the pellets have soaked up in size. They've reached this sort of size, and then you can sow the seeds individually into them. Now when you sow into these little pots, you'll get a little seedling or group of seedlings. These are some calendulas. I sowed 2 seeds in each coir pot, and you can see I've got a nice little clump of seedlings to plant straight into the garden. Or you can use it for growing crops, tomatoes, all sorts of other things. And these little tomato plants have been growing for a few weeks now, and look, the seed germinated, and I've got a beautifully strong tomato plant here to pot up individually and grow on to give me summer crops either in the greenhouse or out in the garden. You can just leave these modules overnight to absorb moisture, and once they're up to this lovely full size, just make a little dimple in the top of each of these modules. That's where I'm going to put the seeds. You just need to make a little bit of a dimple in the top. Then I can get my seeds, and I'm sowing a tomato here called Gardener's Delight, and I literally have to pop 1 seed into the top of each module. Now if your seeds are very affordable, you could put 2 seeds in each module. Cover up the top. What you can do once you've sown the seeds is to put the seeds on a windowsill or in a propagator somewhere warm. What they need is warmth. The blocks themselves are moist, and we're just going to water them a little bit every day just to keep those blocks moist. The seed needs moisture, it needs warmth, and then the seedling will germinate. Once it's germinated, of course, it needs good light as well. Now, after about perhaps 10 days or 2 weeks, those seeds will have germinated. And here's some I sowed a couple of weeks ago, and you can see these have germinated into beautiful little tomato seedlings. I can already see the roots growing out of the bottom of these coir fibre modules. I put 2 seeds in this little module, so what I could do now I know both seeds have germinated, I can remove one of the seedlings. That was just basically my little guarantee, my safety measure. I didn't want to waste time sowing 1 seed and then it didn't germinate, and then you've wasted 2 or 3 weeks. So now I know both have germinated, I can literally whip that seedling out. I don't need it, I can throw it away, and that little tomato seedling I will grow on over the next few months, planted in the greenhouse or outside if you've got an outdoor tomato variety, to grow crops this summer. And these little tomato plants have been growing for a few weeks now, and look, the seed germinated, and I've got a beautifully strong tomato plant here to pot up individually and grow on to give me summer crops either in the greenhouse or out in the garden. Now you'll see little roots growing out through the sides of the coir pot, which means they're ready for potting up into probably a 3, maybe a 4-inch pot. Use a multi-purpose peat-free compost, layer of compost in the bottom of the pot, then filling around with more compost. You can bury the base of the stem of the tomato, that's absolutely fine. It will send out roots into the compost from there, but keep those seed leaves just proud of the soil surface. Firm well with your fingers, and then you can water it in well. And just repeat that for all the rest of your tomato plants. A good multi-purpose compost is essential. Layer in the bottom of the pot, just an inch or so, then pop in the little tomato plant which is raised in your coir pot. Put that down, firm it in the centre of the pot itself, filling around with more compost. And this will grow on, and this is all you really need to do to grow the plant on. Once it's filled that pot with roots, you can plant it up or plant it out in the garden. Firm well, water. Now I keep these in the greenhouse and grow these on for a few more weeks until they're ready to plant out. Now I have to say, just going back to seed sowing for a minute, that I find sowing tomato seeds in little coir pots is a really easy, simple, foolproof way of raising plants and avoids what is called pricking out. But let's cover the traditional way of sowing seeds for a minute. If you want, you can get some small pots, maybe a 3-inch pot. Fill it with a seed sowing compost. Fill it right up to the top and then level the surface of the compost. And then you can put a little layer of tomato seeds over the top. Not one seed in each pot, but put perhaps 6, 7, 8 seeds over the surface of the compost. Just tap them down gently, then cover the seeds lightly. Now if you want, you can cover the seeds with the seed sowing compost, but I like using vermiculite. It's a dry material, you'll buy it in bags from your garden centre, and it's very easy to cover small seeds thinly, just with a very thin layer. So cover the seeds with the vermiculite and then water. I start by watering from the top, and you'll notice that the vermiculite turns a deeper colour, but then you can rest the pots in a tray of water and let the compost soak up as much moisture as it needs. If you want, you can stand the pot in water from the beginning, and once the water has soaked up to the top of the pot, you'll notice the vermiculite turning a deeper colour. Then I cover the pot with some clear kitchen film. This is just to conserve moisture and stop the surface layer of the compost from drying out. Putting the pots in a propagator could do the similar job, and also you could just put a piece of polythene or glass over the top of the pots, but I find that covering each pot individually with this plastic wrapper is an ideal way. And you can keep an eye on the pots every day, and as soon as you notice the first signs of a seed germinating, you can take this layer of plastic away. Place these in a warm place. A warm windowsill would do, but I've got a heated propagator that I can set to a temperature of about 21 degrees, and that will encourage good seed germination. Usually within 7 to 14 days the seeds will germinate. Then remove the plastic from the top of the pot. Leave those seedlings to develop, and as soon as each seedling has produced its first true leaves and it's got a good root system, you can gently take the little seedlings from the pots and prick them out and pot them up individually. So tip them out into your hand, then tease apart each seedling gently. Hold the seedling by a leaf, or the seed leaf, the cotyledon. Don't hold it by the stem, or you might crush and damage the stem. So tease the seedlings apart, take each individual seedling, and then you can pot it up on its own. And this technique is called pricking out. Just put some compost into a small pot. Again, use the seed sowing compost. Big dip down in the centre of the pot, and just ease that root system right the way down into the compost. Put more compost around the little seedling, and it doesn't matter if you just bury the base of the stem, as long as you keep the seed leaves just above the surface of the compost. Water from above, letting the water seep down through the compost, and leave the pots in a tray so that you can water them from below and top up the water as necessary. Then I put the little pots back in my heated propagator so they'll develop, and you can leave these to grow on until the root system has filled the little pot, and then they'll be ready to pot on into a slightly larger container. Just one other point to add is that compost itself contains very little nutrient. Usually a seed sowing or a potting compost will have enough feed in it probably to keep those seedlings going for 5 or 6 weeks, and then you'll need to feed individually. So keep an eye on the colour of the leaf itself. If they start going pale, then you'll know that the seedlings need some more food. So start feeding the seedlings to encourage them to put on good, strong new growth. The young plants will need some support as they grow, so get a cane and push it down into the pot close to the main stem, and then just use some garden string to tie the stem as it develops right up to the top of the cane. Just gives it more support, stops it getting weak and bending over and breaking. And then the plants can be potted up. So once they're really well rooted into their 3 or 4 inch pots, you can move them up into a larger size container to grow for the summer. Use a good peat-free multi-purpose compost, layer of compost in the bottom of the pot. Just check the height. You want to plant it perhaps a little bit deeper than it was in its main pot. Put the plant centrally in the big pot and then fill in around it with compost. Just ease the compost in around the root ball and firm it with your fingertips so it's in really close contact. Just go on feeding the compost in around it. Firm it down, just get right up to just below the rim of the pot. That should be absolutely fine. Now these tomatoes are going to be grown as single stemmed cordons in the greenhouse, so I don't want any side shoots to develop, and you can just pinch these off as they develop. Check regularly in the axial of every leaf where it joins the main stem and pinch out all the side shoots. And now I'm going to explain how I set up my automatic watering system in my greenhouse. I use the AutoPot system, and this is connected to a water tank, a large tank which I can fill with water and liquid feed, which I put right at the end of my greenhouse. Now the individual pots will sit in these plastic trays, and I've got about 10 plants to grow, cucumbers and tomatoes, in the greenhouse this summer. So I just spread the trays, the base trays, along the length of my greenhouse, just spacing these out equally so that the plants will have plenty of space to grow as they develop. Just place these trays all along. I've got 5 of them here now. Just ease them along, space them out along the length of the greenhouse. And now you can connect up the pipework. This clips on to the base of the water tank. A main irrigation pipe goes right the way down the length of the greenhouse. This is the south side, the sunny side of the greenhouse. And from this main water pipe, one smaller water pipe goes into each of these base trays. So get all the pipework in place, and now I can connect up these aqua valves. Every tray has a little regulator aqua valve in the base, and this just regulates the amount of water entering the tray. The float system allows water to come in and cuts the water off when there's enough water in the tray, and turns the water on when it needs more water. Now the aqua valve comes in a number of components, little floats. You just take the screw off the end and connect one of the irrigation pipes onto the little aqua valve unit itself. Just get this in place, screw the pipe on tightly so there isn't a leak, attach the other float system onto the unit itself, and this just pushes down onto a little plastic lug in the base of the tray to hold it securely in place. Now each tray also has some root control mats, so put these in the base of the tray. It just stops any of the roots from the plants actually getting into the valve itself. Check that the valve is working, turn the water on, check that water is coming through the pipework itself. water's flowing really nicely here. So once you know that the water's flowing well, you can put the little aqua valve in place, and this will just allow a small amount of water into the base of the tray. Once there's enough water in there, the valve will turn off. Then you can place your tomatoes, cucumbers, whatever other crops you've got into the trays. Place one plant into each tray itself and just put that down into position, ready for your summer crops to develop. Now the main stem of each plant can be attached to a vertical cane on the south side of the greenhouse. So just push a cane into the compost in the pot and tie it at the top, attached to a cane framework. So you've got the vertical support to tie the main stem of the plant into as it develops. And then I take a cane out from the ridge into the eaves of the greenhouse, so that as the plant develops, I can take it right up to the top of the eaves, making the very most of all the space I've got available in the greenhouse. By the end of the summer, it would have reached the top of the greenhouse itself. And finally, top up the water tank. Fill it right up to the top. Now, as well as adding water, I often put a liquid feed in the pot itself, so that it will feed the plants as they grow. An alternative to the AutoGrow is a system I tried many years ago called the Quadgrow self-watering planter, available here in the UK. And this consisted of a large plastic trough or reservoir which should mix up a solution of liquid feed. And I think it comes in different sizes, but mine had 4 pots that sat on top. Now, to water the pots, there was a capillary matting wick that went from the compost in the top pot right the way down into the reservoir below. So you'd gradually add compost into the pot surrounding the capillary matting wick, and then you could put your tomato plant or cucumbers or anything else in top. So you'd plant your tomatoes into your Quadgrow system, and because the reservoir was filled with a lovely liquid feed, it would feed the plants and keep them going throughout the season. So you just keep the reservoir topped up with water and a liquid feed. You can peep down through the hole in the top to make sure it never dries out, which is the last thing you want in the greenhouse. So every probably week to 10 days you'll need to fill it back up to the brim, and this will keep the crops supplied with water and liquid feed throughout the growing season. I'm growing 4 varieties of tomato in a greenhouse this year. My favourite is Gardener's Delight, small cherry-sized tomato. Lots of people say it is the very best for flavour. I can remember asking Alan Titchmarsh once what his favourite tomato was, and Gardener's Delight came out top of his list. Second is a variety called Shirley. Shirley is a standard greenhouse tomato, good sized crop, great to grow in a greenhouse and under cover. New one I'm growing this year is this one called Floridity, which has lovely long trusses of fruits. Some people say you can get up to 20, 30, even more fruits on each truss. It's a little plum-shaped tomato. In taste tests that people have done in the past, it's come out as one of the sweetest new tomatoes. So really good, promising one. I'm looking forward to growing that one. Lastly, I've got a variety called Akron. Akron in trials produce one of the biggest crops of all. That is a new one I'm really looking forward to. Shirley and Gardener's Delight have both got awards of garden merit as well. So 4 varieties of tomato, all growing in these pots. Really looking forward to trying these this summer. Combination of varieties to put into salads and also to use for cooking and making tomato soups and sauces. Well, how about summer care of the plants that I have got in the greenhouse? Well, the tomatoes and cucumbers growing up nicely. I've got some canes which I've got growing up into the ridge of the greenhouse, so the crop's coming up and over. You could use wires or strings or other plant supports, but I've got this sort of framework of canes which I gradually tie the plants into. So just every few days I'll just get some pieces of string, and where the plant is got a bit too long at the tip, I just literally just gently, just needs to be a loose tie, not tight, because you don't want it cutting into the stem of the plant itself, but I just gradually just tie these down very gently so that the tip of the shoot here on this tomato is just directed towards the ridge of the greenhouse. And the other thing, of course, with tomatoes, I'm sure you'll know, is that these are grown as a cordon, which is a single stem. So I check regularly and see if I spot any side shoots developing. And if I do find, usually it's in the node where a leaf joins the main stem, if I find any side shoots, literally I'll pinch these off. There's another one here which has escaped from lower down. Remove that. So just remove any little side shoots. Sometimes even though you've picked them off, they can regrow after a few months. So just check regularly, just go all along the plants and see if you've got any side shoots developing. Before I even have my cup of tea, first job of the day is to open up the greenhouse. The sun's coming up and I need to make sure that the temperature doesn't rise too high, so the greenhouse needs ventilation. I'm lucky because I've got double doors at the front, so I can open these up to let the air flow freely. I've also got roof ventilators, some automatic ones which will open when it gets hot and close again when the conditions get cool. So these help to keep the airflow going as well, flowing through the greenhouse. I've got louver vents in the side, so I'm just going to open up one of these as well. And I've got some louvers in the side, so wherever you've got ventilators in your greenhouse, open up as many as you can on a hot day, because it will just keep the air flowing and keep the conditions much cooler. Every week or so is to top up this tank of water. Just literally fill the tank up completely, and the water will just flow from this tank into the trays at the bottom, the green trays. They've got a little float system in them, which as the water fills up, the float raises, turns the water flow off, the plants use the water, the float drops down, and when the water in the tray at the bottom has been used up, it opens up the valve again and fills up and keeps the system self-watering. So I reckon this tank of water here will probably supply the plants here for a really good week, 10 days, sometimes even 2 weeks. At the height of the summer, when the plants are fully grown and it's a really hot day, maybe I've got to top this tank up maybe once a week, but certainly will keep the plants watered every day without me needing to do too much at all. And all I do is add some liquid feed, something like Tomarite or tomato fertilizer, and when I top the tank up with water, literally I add some of this at the same time. So I've got a lovely liquid high potash feed, which is what my crops really want, and that keeps the plants watered and fed automatically. Just takes the daily chore, one of those daily chores off me. Now, something else you can do in the summer to reduce the stress of the hot weather on your plants is to raise the humidity in the greenhouse. And to do that, literally every morning, once I've opened up the vents, is to damp down the greenhouse floor. I just leave a really good layer of moisture all over the floor itself. And this water will gradually evaporate as the temperature rises, and that increased humidity means that there's less stress on the plants themselves. And in addition to damping the floor down, I mist the plants, just wetting all of the leaves. Plants will take up water when the air is dry and the conditions are hot, and that flow of water, that translocation of water, means the plants are taking up the water and food they need. High humidity means that the plants don't need so much water at the root. It reduces that stress. So just misting over the plants completely first thing in the morning, I find that water gradually evaporates up, increases the humidity, reduces the stress. The other thing that high humidity does is it reduces the chance of a troublesome greenhouse pest developing. There's a pest called Red Spider Mite. Red Spider Mite is a tiny little mite. It will crawl over the leaves, feed on the leaves, quite often on the underside of leaves like cucumbers. You'll see mottled patterning, you'll see little webs developing, and it can actually completely devastate crops, particularly things like cucumbers. But red spider mites like a really warm, dry air. So by increasing humidity, by keeping the air moist, you actually reduce the chance of red spider mite developing. Now, plants growing in individual pots and trays can be watered by hand. But when you've got a lot of plants in the greenhouse, like I've got some strawberry plants here, I've got these in trays, I can just put some water in the top of each pot, let that drain down, and leave a reservoir of water in the base for the plants to take up from the bottom on hot days. But the other thing you can do is to make a slightly more automated system. This tray, plastic tray, comes with a metal shelf, and if you use a piece of capillary matting, get this at garden centres or mail order suppliers, I'll lay this on top of the tray. I'll make a little wick dipping the edge of the capillary matting down into the base, and keeping that base full of water means that there's a massive reservoir, many pints of water in there. The wick takes the water up, keeps the matting damp, and then I can just keep things like my pots of strawberries on this matting, and they've got, again, their own reservoir of water, their own little mini automatic watering system. And the other thing that happens is you get moisture evaporating from this matting during the day, increases humidity, reduces the stress and water on the plants themselves. And also, as I said before, high humidity means less red spider mite around the greenhouse. Now, you might have noticed in my greenhouse, I've got some of these yellow cards like here, and I hang these up to catch flying pests, particularly whitefly, that can be a troublesome pest in the greenhouse. These yellow sticky glue cards, you have to remove the paper covering on themselves, and then you can hang these up wherever you want in your greenhouse. I hang these around the crops, around the side. I'm just going to put one in over here. And the yellow colour, I think, is attractive to whitefly, and the pests will fly in. I have had people warn me in the past, though, that this glue trap is really sticky. It's not selective, so even a beneficial creature could stick to it. And some people have said in the past that if their greenhouse is very open, they've had small birds come into the greenhouse and they can get stuck to the glue traps themselves. If you are worried, you can put some netting over your door and vents to stop the birds getting in. But I find in this greenhouse here, these are just a good extra way of trapping flying pests without me needing to spray the crops and use pesticides. So there you have it. Open up your greenhouse in the morning, damp down the greenhouse floor, give the plants a water, top up the watering tank and reservoirs you've got, check over the plants, see if there's any problems, maybe pick off the side shoots on your tomatoes, train the tips in, and that way you'll keep your crops growing really well through the summer. Don't forget to give them some occasional food as well, particularly flowering, fruiting crops with a high potash fertiliser. There you have it, a really productive greenhouse feeding you and your family.